So Jesse, here we are, we're on the Farmington River. A really nice run. There's some other anglers down below us, but you're gonna teach me a technique which you know I've been hearing about for years. It's another tool to have in the toolkit. Can you talk to me about this and what's the type of fishing we're gonna be doing?
Well, this European style nymphing technique has been a really popular technique as of recent, simply because it's an extremely effective way to nymph. And the reason why it's really effective is that it uses heavier flies and light tippet. And what that does is allows us to penetrate the water column much faster, get our flies into the strike zone, and give ourselves more opportunity. The more time in the strike zone, the more time at the cafe, the more time to get, an opportunity to get some food. This technique also allows us to stay in relatively close contact with our flies, unlike a suspension device or an indicator where we're actually creating some slack in between the indicator and the flies below, as well as slack in between our rod and our indicator. We're running just under tension right now with this rig, and that allows us to instantly register what's going on with our flies down below. So if fish are a little more finicky and they touch the fly, we're going to know about it through the sighter.
Well, I think one of the first things we talk about that's really important are the tools that we're going to be using to do this. And you just mentioned a sighter. So can you explain what the tools are to get started here?
So typically you'll see a lot of people use a 3-weight rod in this situation, but a 10-foot 3-weight rod. It could be 10.5 foot, 11 foot, but the 3-weight seems to be this kind of sweet spot. And the way these rods are actually designed is have a very sensitive tip, a pretty sensitive mid, and a nice strong butt section. Why this tool is so great is it creates a lot of tip sensitivity, and when we're tapping along the bottom with our flies, it allows us to register what's going on underneath. And once you've kind of dialed in the technique, you'll actually feel the flies ticking on the bottom, which gives you the kind of next level of sensitivity that you don't necessarily get with a suspension device. The longer rod helps a lot with reach and kind of getting across. As you can see, it's a relatively decent sized piece of water on right here. And because we're typically fishing a little bit closer to ourselves and not throwing a suspension device out there and mending to it, we typically work a little bit closer. So the extra length of the rod does help quite a bit with, manipulating the flies over complex currents and keeping them in straight paths.
So you were saying before, like typically you're going to fish out like twice the length of the rod.
At most, right,
like 20,
yeah.
So you're inside of 20 feet.
2 times the length of the rod is really the maximum. We may try to stay right under our rod tip as much as possible. That allows us to be much more in control of what's going on. The further we get away, that's a little bit less easy to control. So the closer we stay in, the higher the ability to dissect the water in much smaller portions, like gridding off the water and working small portions, versus kind of throwing something out there and hoping you're in the right spot, never really knowing exactly where your flies are. This technique, and with the leading of the flies, allows us to really stay in those small channels and really effectively cover water.
The leader you're using here, I mean, it's kind of unique. You've got some colored line up here, and it's a fairly long one. You've got a tag, so you're using a 2-fly system, obviously legal here in Connecticut. What is the general rule for the leaders?
Well, you can kind of break a European nymphing leader down into 2 sections, kind of your upper leader, and then your sighter, and then your lower leader. There's a million different formulas in the world on how you build your upper leader. Very simply, you can use a 9-foot 2X or a 9-foot 0X leader, and then you're going to attach about an 18 to 24 inch piece of sighter material, which is the colored monofilament that you noted. That's our kind of strike indicator, if you will. It's also really gives us a good idea what's going on with our flies. We can follow our sighter down, and it tells us where our flies are. Below that, I have a tippet ring tied on, a 2mm stainless steel ring, and that's just for ease of rigging. It ends at the sighter material and then starts a piece of fluorocarbon tippet below it. That fluorocarbon tippet below it is all 1 diameter, and that helps a lot with helping the sink rate. Here you have 5X tippet material on, so that should sink relatively fast combined with the heavier tungsten flies you're going to put on below. As you come down the tippet material, there's a tag end where we use a double surgeon's knot to create about a smaller 4 to 6 inch tag, and then 18 to 20 inches of the remaining material so you can put 2 flies on it.
One of the biggest problems I have when I'm indicator fishing, whether it's for steelhead on a Great Lakes tributary or it's on a trout river like this, is that the indicator, what's happening at the top, the water flow, versus what's happening down below is completely different speeds, and I know the velocities are impacting my presentation. And this gives me a lot more time in the kill zone, as we call it, or the eating zone, right?
Absolutely.
Can you explain a little bit about that, what that velocity change does, and what the advantages of what we're doing here compared to using an indicator?
Absolutely. As if we were to kind of cross-section a piece of river, looking at our top flow, kind of the middle, and all the way down to what we're calling the strike zone or the kill zone down there on the bottom, they would be moving at different velocities. The top is typically almost some of the fastest water, and as you come down just a little bit, that's basically the fastest portion of the river. So we need to make sure we get through that top portion as fast as we can, because the bottom part is considerably slower. When you know you're in the strike zone, as you're watching the bubbles move much faster than your strike indicator or your cider material, and that's already telling you that your flies are moving much slower than what's going on the surface of the water. This technique with the weighted flies and the thin tippet really helps it get down, simply because the thinner the diameter of the material, the faster that it'll sink. And certainly with that top portion of the river, we want to really get down as fast as we can through that. With a traditional leader, you have a much thicker butt section up there on the top, and that's considerably faster than the bottom. So with a traditional leader with that thick butt section, that's going to get caught up in that faster water much easier because it's a much thicker diameter material. With using one single diameter like we are today with 5X, that'll get through that much faster, not to mention it'll also be much more resilient as the current pulls on it and keeping our flies lower in the water column and much more in the strike zone. Nice little brown trout coming in. Came right out of the soft spot in the middle of that fast water.
Hi, I'm Tom Rosenbauer. For videos like the one you just saw and more, subscribe to our channel. You don't want to miss our weekly uploads of educational videos, exciting trips, and much more.